Okay, so Wizards of the Coast dropped a 50-page PDF of changes, and this is part 2 of me scrambling to understand them and give you the scoop on what's going on. So today we're covering the Mages. This is the Sorcerer, the Warlock, and the Wizard, as well as the new spells that they've released in the playtest. As we'll see, it's pretty much impossible to talk about the new class features without talking about the spells. But it's presented in kind of a weird way. I'm going to be just talking about the spells as they come up as listed in the class features, rather than talking about the spells in one block the way that it has in the playtest. Just kind of makes it easier to understand. So let's start off easy with the Sorcerer. As is the case with all the other classes, the Sorcerer subclass is being moved to level 3. At level 1, they have their regular spellcasting, and they are going to get Chaos Bolt, very fun, and Sorcerer's Burst as well at level 1. This is a spell, both of these spells have this kind of like exploding property where depending on how lucky you get with dice, they can keep chaining damage over and over again. And so that seems to be like kind of the part of the flavor they're trying to introduce to the Sorcerer, is this kind of like very swingy magical damage. Your font of magic feature is pretty much the same, and then you're going to get 3 meta magic options instead of 2 at this level, and they have all been lightly revised. The only ones worth mentioning are Extended Spell, now gives you advantage on concentration checks for that spell. Careful Smell is basically just 0 damage to your allies. Distant Spell now requires now calculates the range as a product of your Sorcerer level, which is very interesting. They've completely reworked Twin Spell. Twin Spell now allows you to basically recast a spell you cast last turn, but for sorcery points instead of spell slots, which is a discount, technically. I think this is pretty much unusable now, which is a shame, but maybe someone will make a clever build with it. At 5th level, you're going to get Sorcerer's Vitality. This is something that only works on yourself, but it's like a better Cure Wounds plus a lesser Restoration, which is fantastic. At 7th level, you're going to automatically get access to Arcane Explosion as a spell. This is the new Fireball. It's the same targeting, same like area and range and damage as a Fireball, but you can choose the damage type, and it does a random effect to everyone who fails their saving throw. This effect can be anywhere from like deafened, which would be pretty lame, all the way to incapacitated, which would be insanely game-breaking. So all of this for a 4th level spell. I think this is probably the best use of your 4th level spell slot against like groups of enemies. And one of the best AoE spells ever printed. So this is great. However, upcasting looks pretty terrible. So at 9th level, you're going to get Sorcery Incarnate, which Jeremy Crawford described as this like Radiant Nova mode that you go into. This is the avatar state of Sorcerers. And it's basically you're going to regain some sorcery points. And then also, while this is active, it's concentration up to a minute, you can use 2 of your meta magics at once on a given spell when you cast it, and you have advantage on all attack rolls of spells that you cast. I will maybe do a deeper dive later into what kind of build you would want to take best advantage of this, but I'm imagining that you're essentially spending that time, those advantage on attack rolls is big, right? So you'd be wanting to spend that time on things like Scorching Ray, where you're making a bunch of different attack rolls so that they all have advantage, and then doing like Empowered Spell on that. But this kind of lends itself to a very particular blaster sorcerer. And it is a default class feature that you get this spell. Overall, I feel like this is generally just a boost for sorcerers. This seems to be the case across OneD&D. All of the classes are getting a little bit more powerful. Part of me wonders if maybe that's to make it more palatable. Like you would want to play this version because your character has more stuff. And we are seeing as well this template of like class features for these full casters being new spells that are just added specifically for them. It's not a sorcerer spell list per se, but it is the sorcerer tag. Overall, these spells are really good. I think that they do steer the sorcerer more towards a damage spellcaster role, but maybe that's what they were doing anyway. So they've also released the Draconic subclass. Draconic also got a big boost. I think this is a pretty unused subclass. I mean, that's true of a lot of the player's handbook options, right? There's generally some power creep over time. But now, oh my gosh. So it's got the normal health boost, but adjusted for the level 3 introduction. And the AC has changed. Now, instead of giving you a +1, it's adding your charisma modifier to your AC while you're not wearing armor, which is crazy. I mean, it's very reasonable to get like a 17 or even like an 18 armor class with this. So that's awesome. But I mean, that's like plate mail on your sorcerer. That's crazy cool. Dragon speech, it's upgraded from like speaking Draconic to being able to communicate with all Draconic creatures. Uh, this is campaign situational specific, but if you're playing a Draconic sorcerer, maybe your DM's going to throw something in. Elemental affinity got a boost, just a minor one. And then we've got this new ability, Draconic Exhalation, that's basically taking your sorcerer spell, Sorcerer's Burst that you get at first level, and doing this like cone effect with it, which is neat. I like that they can kind of like take a spell and then do something different with that spell, like change the spell's impact. There's no reason why you couldn't do that with other class features, but it's just kind of neat to see that they're willing to dive into that and not commit to the like a spell is a spell kind of dogma that 5e has had. With that said, I think that the Draconic Exhalation, Sorcerer's Burst is not a ton of damage, even like with the cantrip scaling. So doing this in a cone, I think, is not amazing. It's certainly not like a better spell or anything like that. You definitely want to be upcasting if you're going to be draconically exhaling with it. Then your next feature is Draconic Wings, which is super, super cool. I absolutely love this. I realize they used to have full flight all the time, and it's like an appropriate level for that to just be a thing. But I really, really like the mental picture of these wings coming out and you flying around the battlefield for this time and kind of being in your like your full power. You know, this is my final form. And then that damage at the end of your turn just passively is really cool. I love the idea of this like radiating aura of power around you. So I think this is going to be very, very satisfying to play, even if it's I think overall on like the power curve, this is higher than it used to be. I think it's still going to struggle strategically to compete with other sorcerer subclasses. I should also mention that Sorcerer gets more spells prepared. This is something that a lot of people requested about Sorcerers. It was kind of their defining trait relative to Wizards, that they had fewer spells but could meta magic. And Wizards had lots more spells, but had to take them as is. We're going to see the lines between these two classes blurred. I think in the past, like laymen would come into the game and be like, "Oh, there's a sorcerer and there's a wizard. Like, what's the difference?" And you'd be able to explain it to them. I don't know how you were going to explain it to them now. Like you can, like there's the spell book and stuff like that, but I just think it's a lot less clear. And we'll see when we get to the wizard why that's the case. Okay, so Warlock. This is the big one. From scrolling through Reddit today, I have noticed that the Warlock class changes are controversial. So let's start here. Since the subclasses are all moved up to level 3, Warlocks get their Pact Boon right at level 1. These Pact Boons have all been kind of reconfigured as cantrips. So you cast a cantrip to summon your Pact Weapon, you cast a cantrip to summon your Pact Familiar, you cast a cantrip to conjure your Book of Shadows. The mechanics are very, very similar to the way that it used to work. There are some big changes. The biggest one is that the Pact Weapon, Pact Boon, now incorporates that most important feature of the Hexblade subclass, namely that you attack and deal damage with your spellcasting ability modifier rather than dexterity or strength. My guess is Hexblade is gone and is now just a part of the Warlock Pact Blade thing. It also gets you the usual benefits you Pact Weapon, right? You automatically get proficiency, you can make it disappear and reappear and stuff like that. It gets returning weapon property if you have a thrown weapon automatically, which is really good. Really good. And then you get extra attack just automatically at level 5 when you have this weapon. So that invocation that you needed to take in order to be extra good martial, don't need it anymore. It's just automatically built in. This strikes me as a big power boost for Pact of the Blade, which is maybe good because I don't think it was the best Pact option. I do think that it's going to be the sort of thing where you've got all of this other magic and all these other invocations you can layer onto it. So I'm guessing you have a pretty potent Gish hiding in this Pact Boon right at level 1. Pact Familiar now has a template stat block. So similar to like what they saw at the Wild Shape, where they, instead of having all these options, they have one template. I'll throw it up on the screen. It's probably big. But essentially it's going to scale off of your spellcasting ability modifier and your Warlock level in a bunch of different places. It's mostly the same interaction with your familiar that you've always had. Voice of the Chainmaster is now automatic. You can speak through your familiar anywhere, so you don't need that invocation. And your familiar gets the invisibility action. So I guess they have a preference for that particular feature. You also get to choose the type. Tome of Shadows, you create Tome of Shadows, you get 2 cantrips and 2 ritual spells that I didn't see anywhere that you can cast as rituals, but like you must be able to, right? Like why would they give you 2 ritual spells specifically? Sound off in the comments. At 5th level, all of your cantrips get the Agonizing Blast bonus damage. As far as I can tell, those were the only big changes. So the main thing here is this is your like cantrip caster or cantrip blaster pact. Like if you want to do the Eldritch Blast thing, instead of taking Agonizing Blast, you can just hold out until 5th level with Tome of Shadows. And then you can, it automatically gets applied. Maybe there'll be some interesting builds made out of that, but overall I think it's got the least amount of power increase. If you look at the stat block for the familiar, it's a little bit better than it used to be, even if it's not as diverse as in terms of options. But the Tome of Shadows is mostly similar. And a little front-loaded too. I don't think there's a lot going on for the Tome of Shadows past 5th level. Now, these Pact Boons right at 1st level, you're getting in addition to your spellcasting. And by that I mean your half-caster spell slot progression. That's right, Pact Magic is out, half-castering is in. My opinion on this is that Pact Magic needed to change. I'm not sure that this is 100% the way to do it, but I don't think that Warlock players liked the 2 spell slots every short rest. It was unique to Warlocks, and it made them distinct, and everyone knew, you know, Warlocks have different rules, and Warlocks have different things going on, and there was an element of strategy there. But I don't think it was actually like fun to only have those 2 spell slots and to be really relying on your cantrips or really relying on, you know, mostly being like a martial hexblade caster. I think that a change is needed, and they've made a change. And so I think that we're going to have to really process the new system. So firstly, the benefits of this new system are obvious. You're casting more often, right? You've got the spell slots of a half-caster. Some members of your party might be half-casters, and you're keeping up pace with them. There's less to keep track of with multi-classing, right? Now this is going to multi-class in a very like similar way to all the other classes. You don't need to worry about like you've got this separate Pact Magic thing. It doesn't scale. It's the same as everything else, right? So that makes the system feel cleaner and less awkward. Warlock can be less restricted in their spell choices now as well, because obviously if your 2 spell slots, which rank up as you go up in level, you either need to choose spells that upcast pretty well, and that you're happy to upcast with those new spell slots, or you're just leaving spells behind and never casting them again because they don't work well for your spell slots. I know I had a player who took Misty Step and he really loved it on his Warlock and he thought it was great. And then, you know, as his spell slots increased, it felt really bad to be spending a 4th or a 5th level spell slot on Misty Step. So he couldn't use his teleportation anymore, which was a bummer. So you're less restricted by that limitation. You can start thinking about spells in the way that they were kind of designed, which is like for the appropriate level, and to use the spell slot that you've got. And we can also see that they've turned Mystic Arcanum into an Eldritch Invocation. And this is where I think a lot of those other invocations, you know, the extra attack, the Voice of the Chainmaster, all of those invocations have been sort of absorbed into the class baseline in order to free up space to take more Mystic Arcanum Eldritch Invocations. And what these do is they allow you to basically choose a spell of a level, and the level is full caster level. So if you're level 5, you can choose a 3rd level spell. If you're level 9, you can choose a 5th level spell that you can cast once per day. So obviously the way you would work this is if you, as a half caster, made it all the way to 18th level or something like that, and then took a bunch of Eldritch Invocations, you could have the spell slots, the 6, the 7, the 8, the 9, and feel like a full caster. So you can use half of your invocations to supplement your spell casting and behave like a full caster. But you don't have to do that. And this, I think, is a response to how flexible the Warlock class was before. Right? They were sometimes they were these martial melee with their pact of blades. Sometimes they were like very deep into casting with their cantrips and their Tome of Shadows. Sometimes they were sort of like a companion based caster with their pact familiar and like boosting up their pact familiar. So I think that they're leaning into this flexibility by saying baseline is half casting, and then we can add things onto it to alter it. Doing so, so leaning into that full caster mode would leave you sort of without a lot to differentiate yourself from like a wizard or a cleric or a bard. You would sort of be using all of your class features in order to mimic their abilities and wouldn't be getting any of their class features. Does that make sense? Which I think would be a little disappointing or lackluster. I think leaning too far into any one direction, either the martial direction or the spellcasting direction, or even the familiar direction, I think it's going to leave you second place to something else out there. If you want to have that familiar be your weapon in battle, you probably want to be like a Beastmaster or a Drake Warden Ranger, right? If you want to be a full spellcaster, you probably want to be a wizard or a cleric or a bard. If you want to be a martial fighter, you probably want to be a fighter or maybe even a barbarian or something like that. So I do think that this is missing that warlockiness of it, but maybe it does occupy a really interesting niche sort of in between those with a lot more flexibility to alter its playstyle or to be able to accomplish different tasks with a certain amount of proficiency. And yeah, I said wizard or cleric in there because here's what else is new. Warlocks are very loosey-goosey when it comes to their main spellcasting ability. Warlocks are now either intelligence or charisma or wisdom-based casters, with everything in here just referencing your spellcasting ability modifier instead of a specific ability score. So you can be that intelligence-based warlock that everyone wanted, or you could be wisdom-based, or you can be charisma-based. So there's a lot of flexibility here, and I'd say that's the defining characteristic of the warlock is malleability. And you know me, I love character options, character creation options. This warlock is going to lend itself to so many unique builds that I'm excited for that. But I agree with members of the community that are kind of feeling like Warlock's uniqueness was taken away. Whatever you land on with all these customizable options, it will be in the shadow of something else. And I feel like I have to ask the question, like, why would you play Warlock? And maybe we're just missing that one central ingredient that makes Warlock feel Warlock. You know what I mean? So, Wizards, I mean, maybe that's my only feedback, is I feel like we're missing a signature trait or signature ability of the Warlock. And I see Eldritch Blast on here, and I see Hex, and they scale with Warlock level, and they're specific to Warlocks now. And I just don't think that's enough. I just don't think that's enough to make a class identity, especially because it's so flexible in terms of these different play styles. I feel like you need something else to be more Warlocky. But I can't think of what that would be. So if you have an idea, let me know. I'm going to be thinking about this all the way until the feedback survey. So the Fiend Patron subclass. So this is actually a subclass I've never used on any build, either public on these videos or private on like my own games or my own like portfolio characters I've never gotten to play. I've never looked into it too deeply, so I actually had to go look it up to figure out what it did before. But essentially, a lot of this is actually the same, which is interesting. You love to see the pack spells being always prepared now. That's just going to add to the number of spells that you've got, which is great. There's just little buffs. So Dark One's Blessing triggers more often. Dark One's Own Luck can be used more often. Fiendish Resilience has lost its kind of like exception for silver magical weapons. Hurl Through Hell, although it gives the enemies a saving throw now, can be used with a 4th level spell slot or just once a day for free. So you get more castings of Hurl Through Hell if you want to. So everything's better by a little bit, which is, again, like the OneD&D signature, right? So I think this has kept up with inflation, as I'm starting to say. Moving on now to the Wizard. So the Wizard spellbook is now their spellcasting focus. This is a change that was so obvious, I genuinely did not know it was not the case in 5th edition until I saw this. There are, I don't want to say more, because there were a lot of rules about the spellbook in the Player's Edition, Player's Handbook, whatever, 2014 edition. But let's just say there are a lot of different rules about the spellbook now. I won't go into them, but one interesting note is it specifically says a spellbook has 100 pages in it, and each spell takes up 1 page. So I think that means there's a cap of 100 spells that you can have in your spellbook. You can create multiple spellbooks with the new spell that is going to allow you to do this. It's called Scribe Spell. This is what you are using as a ritual to transfer spells either from another spellbook into this or from your prepared spells into your spellbook. And it's also going to allow you to create new spellbooks to kind of have backups. And if you spend long enough, like I guess it's probably going to take you like days, you can fully copy your spellbook into 2 different things. And if one gets blown up, you can get the other one. That's right, Scribe Spell is the new way that you copy spells over. This is going to be a theme with Wizard. They get a lot of signature spells as their class features, and Scribe Spell is right at 1st level. Notably, because you don't have to use the ritual function, if you really need to, you can pop a Scribe Spell off and expend the spell slot and do it quickly. I don't know when this would be helpful, but it's got the flexibility to do that. And then all the way, boom, 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 at 5th level, you'll get Memorize Spell. This allows you to swap a prepared spell with a spell in your spellbook. So you basically unprepare this one and prepare the one from your spellbook. For a spell slot, I mean, you can. It's a ritual, so this is probably, I guess, what you're doing to like over the course of a long rest. You're just memorizing spell ritual to swap out your spell list. Spending a spell slot on this honestly feels terrible. I would never do that, even if I like really needed like a very specific like protection from good and evil against a bunch of fiends that showed up. Don't think I would waste the spell slot. But yeah, this is the way that you are going to swap out your prepared spells. So, and it's a feature, I guess. 7th level, you're going to get probably one of the most significant spells I have ever seen Wizards of the Coast print. You're going to get Modify Spell. Modify Spell allows you to take a spell that is in your spellbook and add one of these modifications to it, which lasts until you take a long rest or you cast this again. So you can only have one modified at a time. These modifications are pretty fire. Like, the concentration one is bananas. Just, you can't lose concentration through damage. Imagine doing this on Banishment. Banishment that your DM cannot interrupt the concentration. I guess they can incapacitate you by killing you or something, but still, right? Like, still. Wild that this is even allowed. I'm excited when I read this spell. I'm excited in a way that makes me feel like there's gotta be loopholes and there's gotta be like secret things you could do and like combinations. And all of a sudden I find myself like really looking forward to playing a wizard in OneD&D, like in a big way. This is the kind of systems change that I actually think the game really needs. This is perhaps my favorite part of the OneD&D playtest so far, even though it's broken as hell. Like, so first of all, there's almost never a case where you are going to want to like remove a somatic component or sorry, a verbal component from a spell. Like, not all of these are equally good, but there are applications for all of them. And as we will see, you're going to start really using this spell a lot more at later levels as Wizard. I do have to be honest, I am a little annoyed at how similar some of these are to meta magic. Jeremy said that they took special steps to make sure that they were distinct from meta magic options. And I don't know what special steps those were, because that's just transmute spell on there. That's just transmute spell, the meta magic. You've got distance spell right there, just blatantly. And then the new extended spell gives you advantage on concentration. So the concentration is pretty similar. Subtle spell to remove the components. Like, this is just the meta magic table. Jeremy, come on. I will say, this ritual one, very interested in that. I see you copying the Sorcerer's homework. I don't like it. I want these two classes to be more distinct. The concept of modify spell, A+, S tier, incredible stuff. The specific modifications that you've listed here leave a little bit to be desired. So now at 9th level, the Wizard class is complete with Create Spell. This, in more words, makes a modify spell permanent. And it gives you the option to scribe it in your spell book so that it is a brand new spell, with a new name and everything, that's just the effect of the spell before, with the modification permanently embedded. So this is how you can modify a spell, scribe it into your spell book, and then go modify a different spell on the same day. And now you've got both of those options to work from. It was pointed out to me on a Reddit thread that because you need to cast this basically on something that comes from the arcane spell list, or modify something from the arcane spell list, and the new spell would be specific to you as a wizard, it actually isn't up for multiple modifications. So you can't remodify. You can, at higher levels, add multiple modifications to a spell and then lock those in with Create Spell. So it seems like this is going to be very interesting at higher levels, and scale at higher levels in that way. You can be adding more of these modifications in, which I think is really, really cool. And the fact that it explicitly says that you can name the new spell, I mean, players were reflavoring spells anyway, but just to kind of give that open license is going to be a blast. I love modify spell. I love create spell. I think this is a fun way for wizards to work. The only problem is, I feel like now it takes a long time for Wizard to really ramp up into what it could be, right? You're always gonna want like a weekend of downtime if you're a wizard to be like doing all of these spells in succession and doing them as rituals and taking up that time and asking for everybody's gold. You need a lot, like to pile a lot onto the wizard to make them good. And sometimes that's just not like a sportsman-like way to play the game. Sometimes you're in a dungeon and people want to finish the dungeon and you don't get to spend your one day working through all your spells, modifying them and saving them. The rest of the wizard is pretty much the same as it used to be, just with the new template, right? So it kind of caps out at 18th level and you get your epic boons. The evoker is also pretty much exactly the same, which is good. Basically, the big change is it gives you some evocation spells right up front, first level. Well, third level, but first level spells. And then there's a minor buff to potent cantrip, so it works on cantrips that cause saving throws as well. Otherwise, it's the evoker that we all know and love. And with that, I think that's everything I have to say about the mages. Really, really big swings being taken with the warlock and with the wizard. I love it when they shake the foundations of the system. Looking forward to the monk. How much of a power play would it be if wizards was just like, we're just gonna not do a monk? You guys complained so much about the monk, we're just gonna not do it. There's no more, that's all of the classes. That's it, we're done. It'd be incredible. No, looking forward to the monk. Last class that's not yet released, but obviously we've got a ton of subclasses that we need to see in these playtest documents. So looking forward to that as well. I hope I have helped shed some light on the new changes that they've been making. I hope you guys are interested in the OneD&D playtest. And don't forget to subscribe to see more videos from me. My class ranking series is going to be continuing to come out for the next couple of months. And don't forget about my build videos as well. Thanks, guys.